Hey everybody, it's Betsy from Story Drawing Skills. As you may know, I saw this video called You Should Make a Webcomic by Super Death Show, and it made me decide that I needed to make a webcomic. So I decided to make 100 panels of webcomic from scratch in 6 months from July to December 2017. Yeah, I failed. So now I'm persevering and I'm just altering my goal a little bit to finish a webcomic. Maybe not in 6 months, but how about while I'm working 2 jobs and by the end of the year? This vlog episode is going to talk a little bit about this wonderful flowchart that I've made for you to help you make it easier for your project. Does it change the story? Is it important to the story? Yes? Then do it right. No? Then just take a shortcut. Doesn't even matter because people just want to know about the story. So it's been a while again and I wasn't quite sure where I left off. So here's a little real-time scrolling of me going, oh yeah, I was talking about the different magics and how they balance each other out, rock, paper, scissors, all that jazz. And then I looked at this awful little creature that I drew. I'm like, that's just kind of disturbing. Like, it's not very threatening and I didn't think it really illustrated what I was trying to talk about. So instead I just drew like this sort of bear thing with the lizard claws and horns, I don't even know, and just had one of the shields split a tree in half. I'm not sure that gray was very wise of a choice, but is it important to the story? Does it change the story? No? Then leave it alone. Just keep going. Next thing I had to do for this story was make an aerial view of the map of the kingdom to show like where the magical barrier surrounds it and keeps it safe. And I had never drawn a map in an aerial view like this before, so I did a tiny bit of research, looked at some references, and it's basically just a bunch of boxes and little lines for roads and maybe some hatching if it's like a kingdom that's surrounded by cliffs or something. I don't know. Honestly, I just totally fudged this and I was just like, does it matter to the story? No. Is it going to change the story? No. Well, then let's just do it as quickly as possible. So I decided to take away the cliff and I'll put the magic lines of the barrier later. Then I was about to draw the little figures again and I'm like, wait a minute, I think I already drew these figures and they're going to be the exact same over here, so I'm just going to copy and paste them. Because you guys know, if you've watched some of my other vlog videos on making this webcomic, I used to be one of those copy-paste snobs that if I saw that an artist copy and pasted something, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you copied and pasted. You're not a real artist. You're just a slacker, right? Like I used to have that attitude. And that was because I had never made my own comic. I had never understood that there is always a choice between the time and the value of the output. So if it's something like a little explanatory note of, you need these 3 mages, that's not a huge story beat and it's not like even emotionally important or anything. So why would I put in a lot of time drawing that when really I want to spend my time on the important stuff with the characters? So same thing over here. I copy and pasted one of those guys and flipped it because we just need to get this done so that we can get back to the important stuff. So does it change the story? No. Take a shortcut. On this little report, at first I didn't put any writing behind the figure and it looked weird. It looked like unbalanced. So then I did put some fake writing behind the figure and then it looked too cluttered. But instead of trying to figure out which way was the better one, I'm like, is it important to the story? No? Then let's just go. Let's just move. Again, copying and pasting because Socorro has now read the entire scroll. So I had to show that all of the scroll paper is now on the left because it started on the right and then now it's empty. She has come to the end and it's time to get back to the real world, which unfortunately includes a huge establishing shot of a lecture hall. Yay! And I kind of did this on purpose because after we've had so much information delivered in such simple drawings, I wanted to kind of like reestablish like, okay, now we're back into what things actually look like. And Fire Alpaca has this cool little tool that is like a vanishing point, but it's actually not that cool as I found out because I'm doing 2-point perspective, which means I need 2 vanishing points. And I quickly found that since you're only working with 1 vanishing point at a time, it's incredibly difficult to reposition your vanishing point exactly where it was before. So you either have to like do all of the lines that are going to the right, kind of marked in red right there, or light pink, and then go back and put it over on the left side where all the blue lines, or, you know, not. And you'll find out later what I chose to do. Right now, just brainstorming, taking bits and pieces from a bunch of references that I found on lecture halls. So some of them I liked these like puddle stairs, and I liked the raised platform. I liked that it was very theatrical looking, more like a stage rather than just, you know, a classroom. Tried to put some fancy podium there, maybe some other people, and then some sort of light fixtures maybe, and another window, skylight, and then decided to take out some of the lighting fixtures because, again, it didn't help the story, kind of cluttered up the composition, so I wanted to keep it just real clear that this was a big room, like big room with stadium seating. I couldn't really think of what to do to fill up the walls, so again, look at your references. What did they fill up their walls with? Use some of those ideas. And then I wanted a big crowd of people over here, and this is just me like super random doodling. Like I have no idea if this is correct perspective. I have no idea if this even makes sense, but this is the feeling that I'm going for, that there's a full audience. Then I tried to get more technical with it because I don't know if everybody knows, but I actually wrote a book on drawing backgrounds and, you know, how to do all the correct perspectives. And so I was on a real sort of, I don't know, egotistical fear, I guess, that if I didn't get this perspective like spot on right, that it was going to just ruin people's faith in me, and they'd be like, how did she write a book on perspective if she can't even draw perspective in her own comic, you know? It got me super uptight, so you are going to see me draw and redraw and redraw and redraw so much on this part here, all because I was afraid of what people might say or how they might compare it to the book I wrote. And you can't do that, okay? It's just going to mess you up. So you can see I took out the curved element. At first I was going to have the seats curved around like a true stadium seating thingy, and then it was too hard, so I'm like, okay, that doesn't even matter to the story if it's curved or not, so let's straighten it out. And then I got the idea, like, wait, where's Socorro in all this? You want to be able to take whatever's in the previous panel and relate it to something in the next panel. At least that's one of my rules of thumb, one of my hidden rules. And so I decided to put her like right up in the foreground so that people could make the connection that those were her hands on the scroll, and now we've just backed up a little bit and now we can see over her shoulder that she's in this lecture hall. And I had to play with the canvas size to try to fit in my vanishing points. And, you know, it wasn't going too badly, right? Like, here's me putting in all my very precise lines and switching back and forth between the different perspective tools. And it's all very crisp and all very spot on. And then I realized that I have never used the perspective guidelines at all in this comic ever. So why would I start using them now? Because that would be kind of a jarring art style change if suddenly the backgrounds, which were more doodly, more loose, and more sketchy, all of a sudden become completely pristine and mechanically accurate. And that also helped me kind of let go of the feeling that I had to get all of my perspective right because I wrote a book on it, and instead just go with what was good for the story. What's good for the story is that your art doesn't suddenly change from sketchy to precise only because you're now indoors instead of outdoors. That's ridiculous. So yeah, made that snap decision that wasn't going to pay too much attention to being 100% accurate with the perspective, and instead go just for the feeling, just kind of keep it generally in the right perspective. There's obviously some mistakes, actually a lot of mistakes by the time I'm done. And it's okay because it keeps the story flowing. And I've noticed even when I'm reading webcomics on my own, like I'm reading other webcomics, I might occasionally stop on a panel and just kind of admire the art, but most of the time you're caught up in the story. You want to see what happens next. So even if you do a really vague panel, or I shouldn't say vague, don't be vague, be clear, but art-wise, if it's not totally pristine and finished and inked and colored like the most beautiful masterpiece you've ever made, it's fine because people are more interested in the story. I am speaking as a reader now, not even as a creator, but as a reader. I get so frustrated with webtoons because there's something about when a comic gets selected as a featured comic, then the artist always starts over. I'm like, no, we've already gotten 10 chapters in. Why would you start over now? And most of the time it's to fix the art, to make the art better. But I was fine with the art. I just want to know what happens next, man. You saw me mess around with those stairs and then ultimately delete them. Why? Because was it important to the story that there were stairs on that podium stage? No, it wasn't important. And so why waste your time? Let's just make sure that it still looks like somebody is speaking to a bunch of people in the audience. That's the only thing the story needs right now. All this other stuff doesn't even matter, man. Doesn't even matter. So just sketching in freehand, no straight line tool, no perspective grids, no nothing. Things are really wonky in the perspective part, but that's okay. Even this thing, this podium, I tried to make it look fancy, but it started looking really sci-fi, like really spacey. So I'm like, you know what? Let's just take it down a notch. Simplify. Here's the speaker that doesn't really care about his job right now, so he's kind of grumpy faced. Those are going to be windows. Okay, those are some of the ugliest windows I have ever drawn in my life, but is it going to change the story? No, it's not, so it's fine. Moving the text to a better spot, and what else am I doing? Oh, I'm putting in the flat colors. Awesome! This is when I really felt like I was finally making progress, when I got to go back to flat colors, because again, I had been doing so many explanatory notes and doodles that had no color whatsoever that I hadn't colored in quite a while. So, yeah. This is going to go on for a while of me coloring, and it's fun, but, it doesn't, oh, hey, I was listening to London Grammar at the time. It doesn't really change the story, does it? One thing I've been finding is that I'm not using the paint bucket enough. It's really, really time-saving if you just, outline it and then paint bucket that sucker. Trying to find an overall color palette for the room. And I kind of wanted it to be ever so slightly muted because this is a flashback and not what's happening right now. And so I've seen a lot of different art style changes and interesting things that people do to make sure you know that this is a flashback and not what's happening right now. I didn't want to go too crazy, and I didn't want to go too shortcutty. I could have left it in black and white or, done some other things to just make it go faster. But I did want to get back to actual colors. And even though they aren't the greatest colors, they are in color. So that will be a clue that this is no longer explanatory notes and that this is what's really happening. It was a poor choice to put those windows in the back because now this guy is backlit, but that's all right. It's not going to change the story. I have made a mental note for next time to check my light sources. Actually, no, I didn't, because remember way back when the monster was coming up and supposed to cast a shadow on them, and I had the light source in the wrong direction. Yeah, I still haven't learned, I guess, about light sources, but that's okay. And then just trying to find some colors for these tables that are getting farther and farther away from us. Atmospheric perspective. Color in that dude. I wasn't sure whether to go super crazy anime bright hair colors or just keep it kind of natural, and in the end I'm pretty sure I kept it fairly natural because I didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention to the other people. Even now, that blonde kid sitting in front of her, I'm just like, oh wow, he's brightly colored, maybe he's a side character. Nope, sorry, he's not. He is just a random guy in the audience, and I unfortunately colored him so bright that he looks like he's supposed to be important, but he's not. Doesn't even have a face. Literally hasn't been designed or anything, so yeah. And then this guy, very loosely based on a teacher that I actually know, so that was fun. Whenever you're struggling for designs of a character that's not going to appear very much in your comic, I'm not saying to copy people that you know in real life, but you can always use them as the basis of inspiration. I mean, that's happened a lot in a lot of movies and books and things that we all know and love. We hear that the creators, based this particular design on somebody they knew, and it's fine. People do it. You just don't want to do it too much because you're going to run out of people unless you know like billions and billions of people. And also it's not as, what's the word? Cohesive. That's the word I was looking for. Because if you're continuously bringing in random people from your own life and not changing them to fit into the world you've created, then obviously they're going to stick out like a lot. Going back to Photoshop, I found that taking my files into Photoshop and then from Photoshop into Fire Alpaca and then back into Photoshop will kill my layer effects. So all my magic lines I had to redo and put them back on their own separate layers so that I could make them glow. And then I had to put this text back in, and I couldn't find my text boxes because all of my text had rasterized, so that wasn't great. Had to go find that again. Couldn't even remember how I did speech balloons earlier in the comic and wasn't about to go check, so I just did it kind of standard style and decided, you know what, it's fine. It's good for the story. So that's where I have completed, I believe, panel 43. Can you believe it? I have been stuck at panel like 30 something for so long, and now I finally get to say that I've made it to panel 43. Gonna start on 44, almost halfway there. This is so exciting. Oh my gosh. So yeah, if you take away anything from this video, remember this flowchart. Does it change the story, or is it important to the story? If the answer is yes, by all means, spend a good amount of time on it and make sure that it's right. If not, if this is not going to change the story, if it's not important to the plot or the characters, then why are you wasting your time? And if you're, on a strict deadline like me, cut the corners where they need to be cut. And that's where they would be cut, is on these things that aren't really that important.